It's 5:33 and I think everybody's here. So we're really grateful that you were all part of this workshop. And today's the last week. And I read as much as I could in the cafe today to try and get caught up. But I had people zooming to the left of me and zooming to the right of me. And as if the zoom to the right of me wasn't, on both sides, wasn't enough, the person on the right side of me was doing the leg bounce because I think she was on her third espresso or something. And so it was like two Zoom calls and a leg bounce, and and it's Duncan. It's not like you're reading the comics and haha,
Yeah.
you turn the page. So I had to reread stuff, and anyway, I made lots of
Yeah.
notes, as is my habit. But I'm so grateful for this workshop. I'm so grateful to have a guide into these waters of HD and Duncan and how potent they are and how many of the pieces of the puzzle kind of fit in a little better now, Michael, because of your guidance and because of this discussion that's happening. So in way of announcements, we'd really like to do something, whatever you want to facilitate, Michael's fine with me, but um, if you talk a little bit about the John Clark, before we get going, the John Clark lectures on Olson and Blake and the possibility, what you plan to do with that project and the possibility, would there be an opportunity to do a workshop on that? I'm hoping you can do one at the next Cascadia Poetry Festival, October 9, 10, 11, 2026, which we're working on.
I
Um,
would hope so. I
but
would
talk to
hope.
it. Tell us about what it is and what you plan to do maybe in just a minute or two.
Well, I discovered this by accident, and it's really weird. I was in Buffalo when Jack gave these lectures, and I don't remember them. I guess it was before we really connected. Or I was too high or something. I don't know. But it was in 1985, Jack gave a series of like 5 weeks. He gave lectures on the relationship of Charles Olson and William Blake. Um, and Blake was Jack's, uh, well, he did his dissertation, his PhD dissertation on Blake. So he was a Blake guy and really uh, not in an not in an academic way. Like he embraced Blake as a real teacher. Um, and that's what that was his contribution to Olson. Olson had known Blake through Frances Balderoff. She wrote a book on Blake and Joyce called Let There Be Los, I think, something like that. Station Hill published it. Um, Now it's fascinating. She was a really brilliant, brilliant woman. Um, and Jack Olson credited Jack with giving, but notwithstanding his reading with Francis, Jack was credited by Olson as giving him Blake. Now, the other relationship there was Jack's relationship with Olson, which was it was it was wonderful. It was really wonderful, you know. He first of all, he was an assistant professor when Olson he was hired as Jack was hired as an assistant professor at Buffalo, hired away from Bowling Green, in Ohio. And when he met Olson, it was like his life changed. And he self-designated himself as Olson's student. And he participated in both of the Olson classes that are sort of mythic at this point. One was on contemporary poetry and one was on myth. Jack ended up, in fact, finishing the myth course for Olson because his wife was killed in an accident towards the beginning of that course, and he kind of fell apart and just went back to Gloucester. But he left Jack in charge of the course. So anyway, Jack had a very special relationship to both Blake and Olson, and his insights. I'm only a little bit into these lectures. I haven't really had time to delve too deeply yet. But the the lectures, what I've heard so far are it's amazing. It's really amazing thinking. It's Jack dealt deep diving into the mind of both of these poets. Um, so it's going to be rich, I think, and interesting. I found what happened was I was down in Buffalo and I was going through some boxes of Jack's stuff, and I came across a flyer for this lecture series. It was sponsored by the Jungians, the Analytic Psychology Society of New York, Western New York. And there was a, and then I started trying to figure out how I was going to, I tried to reach out to the Analytic Psychology Society, but they didn't really respond. And then I had this brilliant insight. It wasn't mine. I'm sure it was my angel. Somebody like nudged me somewhere on some realm and said, you know, the poetry collection, doofus. So I wrote to Jim Maynard in the poetry collection, and it really, Jim's a sweet guy, and it stimulated his, Philip Marlowe librarian sense. Like you scratch a librarian's, curiosity about some document that you discovered that's like significant and nobody knows about it, and it's somewhere in the archive, and they go all Philip Marlowe on you, and literally about 2 weeks later, he emailed me that he'd found the tapes. They'd been donated by the Jungians to the poetry collection, and there they were. So Jim
What format?
they were on those, cassette tapes.
Yep.
Everything in those days was a cassette tape. That was just before the CD. I guess the CD was coming in right then.
84, I remember 83, 84 CDs. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't know how many people were storing things on CDs.
No, they weren't doing that. And that was the thing about the cassette tape. You could just have a little recorder and take it to the reading. And anyway, so I've got them now. And I've started there's AI transcriptions that they ran it through some AI thing and it did basic transcriptions. But I'm going to do this. Sharon Thiessen and I are old friends from actually we met each other in Robin Blazer's class on Charles Olson in 1968. Um, it was it was a world-changing moment for both of us actually. And yeah, we've been friends closer on and off over the last, God, what is it now? How many? I don't even want to count.
Please don't count.
Yeah,
We get the idea though. And Sharon was here at our festival, and she's a dear. She's a delight. In fact, she stayed with us, and Bhakti said she can stay at our house anytime, and she doesn't say that about a lot of people. So
wonderful poet,
yeah,
brilliant at
brilliant.
that.
Yeah,
And
99% time.
she gave a lecture on Olson a couple of years ago in Gloucester that's just marvelous. Her work on the letters between Francis Bolderoff and Charles Olson. Oh, thanks, Matt. Is yeah, yeah, there it is.
Yep.
It's really good. I mean, it's so good. It that's all I can say.
I
It's
didn't
so
know it was
good.
published. So it was
It was
published.
She
yeah, it was published by Watershed Press, and I think they did 100 copies. It's a beautiful chapbook, and Watershed Press. I think they have some through Asterism. So let me know if you want it and can't find it. I can find a way to make that available to you. Michael, I'm feeling an urgency to get the class going.
okay.
So and Julia has a comment.
Yeah, Julia.
One thing before we move on.
Um, this class should have been 7 weeks.
Yeah, yes,
So
it's true.
keep that in mind. So, uh, because I feel, I mean, I read as much as I could, but I don't feel that we're doing full service to part 2. And
Uh,
It's
it's nobody's fault. It's
no.
just that there is so much there.
Michael, do you think if we plan something in about 3 weeks or a month, it could be kind of like a reunion, and that would give us some time to finish the book and have a final discussion? Would you be up for
I'd
that?
be happy to do that, more than happy.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
so glad I said something. Now
yeah.
I will mute myself.
All right.
Mission accomplished.
It's true.
Okay.
It's very long. It's a lot of material and it's very complex and rich. Um, does anybody have like a passage that they'd like to start us off with?
Can you remind us of the section we were supposed to read? What, like from what
Well,
page to what page?
we were it was from chapter 6 on. So it was from 403 to the end, which is like 599 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know there was no chance.
I have one that I think is kind of interesting. This is from page 405. Speaking of the War Trilogy, you know the poem, you have read it well. I do not feel you do justice to the War Trilogy yet. You write, for you as a friend, a reader of the original, know it is so much more, so much other than the likeness I have drawn. And then he goes on from there. And I thought that was very interesting how he addresses the reader directly.
Yeah, all of us, eh? Make too much of a poor matter. The passage of the poem that appears never comes up to the poem I am imagining. But this is the imaginary critic, right?
Hmm.
Duncan's addressing.
Hmm. You want to keep going?
The thing is, okay, sure. The lady smiles at us, for this figure I am drawing from of the lady with a book may be the very lady who appears in her tribute to the angels, her author in my author, which is so then, yeah. So there's no easy trick, difficult even for the experienced stranger. HD tells us, is she talking about the person's relating herself to time here in the rhythm of the clock's ticking to appear to the poet in her dream? But it is a double image, for the lady appears to the reader as she appeared to the writer in the medium of the poem, another trick, in the hypnotic measure, the evocative tick of syllables in procession. She is so communicated. My other reader, who is not HD's reader, he sets up quite a maze of readers here. What's he doing? Why is he doing it this way? It's kind of interesting. I mean, these poems were trashed, actually, at the time by the respectable poetry community. I mean, they were seen as um, antique, uh, sort of weirdly religious poetry that was so out of date that there was no point in even seriously addressing it. I mean, she wrote about angels. Randall Jarrell never thought about an angel in his life, probably, much less met one. HD met a bunch of them. Um, or she had it, I don't know how you guys want to address it, but that's the language that she had to talk about the experience that she had. Um, it's not an argument, it's not a theological argument or a metaphysical proposition. It's the language that she had to talk about the experience that she had. Um, and she had it, you know. I, John, saw, I testify. Has everybody read those poems? I find them so, every Christmas, I read The Flowering of the Rod out loud to whoever's around. I make them sit down and I read The Flowering of the Rod. And by the time I get to the end, I'm weeping. I'm always like, she's so there. Her heart is so there in the work. Her mind is so receptive and brilliant in its acknowledgement of that reception. Um, they're great. And to imagine that those poems were actually dismissed is like, I still don't get it, you know? I mean, what is wrong with those people? So Duncan's like addressing, I guess he's like, he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to do this as some kind of academic exercise where he defends HD's, you know, prosody or whatever from, or imagery or metaphoric universe, whatever.
On
He
the
wants
previous
to,
page, he says, "For I needed this book for a place for her to exist in me."
yeah, man, and did he do it?
I
Yeah.
feel that he, in these passages, he sets up a kind of seance with these various readers that parallels for us reading it. It kind of guides us and parallels um, the experience that she had with the presences,
Uh-huh.
the lady with the book, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Uh, so that you can't, I don't know how to say this, but if you try to read it just intellectually, it doesn't work. You have to make room for who these various readers are. I have to keep going back and straightening out, where I am with this crowd
Yeah.
that that in a way he's having a visitation with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I could jump in here, sorry, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple things. Yeah, that's such a great passage that Jay brought us to. I want to send everyone a link to something that Noam Chomsky wrote about the question of mysticism and science, and think about that because one of the things that he was concerned with, he's not a poet, as all of us know, but one of the things he was concerned with was the ways in which dualism has been misunderstood since the 17th century. And I'll send that link out. We can talk about that later. You guys can fact check me on that. But what I love about what Jay was talking about here was how Duncan is so precise in saying what appears and what is. And is she talking about this person's relating herself to time here, the rhythm of the clock's ticking, to appear to the poet in her dream? But it is a double image. And then he says later on, she is so communicated. And we were talking about last time about Emerson and the way in which a poet isn't just in terms of self-reliance, isn't just a self who does things, but is a self who is connected as a conduit to others. And I think that's a key that's a key thing. And I sort of want to come back to this later on, but that's a key thing that I think Duncan really wants to emphasize that a poet is a conduit of other energies. However, whatever vocabulary we want to use, those energies come together in the
Yeah.
poet
Michael, I'd love if you would follow that with,
themselves.
Michael, I'd love it if you, that notion of the poet as conduit, which is kind of like what the new American poetry, I mean, the poet as radio tuned to a station from Mars,
Yeah.
Jack Spicer, and the practice of outside, Robin Blazer, and impersonal verse, Gary Snyder, all these different ways to say that you're tapping into something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
And the critics of the time who were canceling, or you could put it that way, canceling HD, thinking that all this channeling of spooks and stuff is so far out we can't do it. Uh, it has always been useful for me to see art and especially poetry in terms of a continuum of open versus closed. And so
Yeah.
she's running in to the closed people who were essentially running the poetry business and in many ways are still running the poetry business. Can you speak to how that all fits in, poet as conduit, and how that's too far out for the convention? Rodrigo Toscano calls them the normie poets.
The normie poets. I don't, poetry wars, God.
Well,
Um,
I'm not
I
interested in the war so much as I am
yeah,
interested in the difference in what a poem is, what poetics are, what a process is. Those things interest me more than the personalities of the poetry wars.
it all has to do with your relationship to form. That's the fundamental question. Like, is your form, I mean, the I think I talked a bit about the Georgians. The Georgians were the inheritor of a tradition of poetry that you had to master. Have you ever read Saintsbury? Saintsbury's terrific, actually, on prosody. He has the definitive book from the on 19th century, well, on English prosody through the 19th century. And I mean, he lays it all out with like a precision that's quite useful. It's just that he's on the wrong side of the argument. Like he's arguing that these are the forms that the poet has to master in order to become. It's like the same thing with painting. Like you have to be able to paint an apple that somebody wants to actually take a bite out of before you can get into abstraction or whatever, right? Like as if there's some path through these various modes that are prerequisites for other modes. And that's bullshit. It's just bullshit. The the question has always been, at least since uh, lyrical ballads in what was that, 1798. Um, at least since then, the question has always been a pre-existing form or the form that the poem takes as you address yourself to the situation that the poem's emerging from.
Form is nothing. Form is a revelation of content, as Levertov said
Yeah.
with about Creeley's comment.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. And my sense is that form and content are aspects of meaning, but you're beginning with meaning and an encounter with meaning. And out of that encounter with meaning, form and content both arise. It's like they're not, one doesn't precede the other. They arise together out of that confrontation or that engagement. Um, I know Creeley gets a lot of shit for that, but I mean, it was good. At the time, it was absolutely, form is never more than an extension of content. I mean, that kind of blew the roof off the new criticism. And that was the point. It was like a battle cry.
And then Levertov said form is never more than a revelation of content, which I
Yeah.
think is more accurate. And then the
But that's
Atlin,
still, you know what, I'm sorry, that still puts content first. That still says there's content and then there's form. And I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true. I think that misstates the case. I think form and content emerge at the same time out of an entanglement with meaning. Um, and you can't say one is never more than a, you know what I'm saying? Like they don't, one doesn't proceed from the other. It doesn't precede it. Not in my experience anyway. I mean, it does for the poetry that you're calling closed poetry, which somebody, I think it was Lowell, introduced the raw and the cooked. That there's he got it from Levi Strauss, I think. Um, but that there's cooked poetry and then there's raw poetry, which is it's like that's nonsense, you know. It's not cooked and raw. Maybe it's like I don't know, incarcerated and free, something. The point is the point is what is the relationship of the poet to the material? And the material is where the poet encounters meaning. And out of that comes an impulse to write a poem for some reason, you know, that probably 10 people are going to read, but you do it anyway. And it it I mean, this is what Duncan says over and over and over again, that it will articulate itself and in the form that emerges out of the struggle to engage with the meaning.
Yeah, I think he says in one of his Olson lectures that you can't get it wrong because the universe is doing it.
That's right. Yeah. And you know what? He's anybody who writes poetry over a period of time will have that experience where the poem, you think you're writing the poem, and then you go back and read it and realize that you didn't know what you were writing. You had that there was some that was coming from somewhere. Um, I mean, I'd had the experience of writing that just possessed me, where I couldn't stop. Like I was get up at 4 o'clock every morning and write and write, you know, and then and I know where was that coming from? I mean, you could say unconscious or you can say wherever you want. It wasn't coming from my ego consciousness. I was not planning and plotting and, you know, analyzing. I was just my fingers were moving as fast as they could in relation to and I was actually writing it down too in a notebook, to this. I don't want to, I mean, I love Jack Spicer and I just don't want to, I don't want to crib from him, but it's like that. It's like different voices are coming in and there's no stopping them. You just have to hang on the best you can.
George Bowering was quoted in the Vancouver Sun talking about happiness, and he said it in a very succinct way. And I've Googled this so many times, it comes up as the first result when I start typing George Bowering on happiness. And I want to share it here and read from that. And he says, when a poem has you in its grip, you have to shut up all your usual yapping and listen as hard as you can. If it continues to work and nothing interrupts it, you will get to be the first reader of the poem.
Yeah.
It will be a happy event. So
George is so smart.
I think that the Randall Geralds and you know I hate to be binary about it, but just for the sake of trying to make a point, the Randall Geralds and the closed poets of the world might respond, no, wait, George, no, you're not the reader of the poem, you're the author of the poem.
Yeah.
So George, by saying you will get to be the first reader of the poem, communicates so clearly this notion that wherever it's coming from is coming through you, not
Yeah.
from you necessarily.
Yeah. I know. And you go over over passages that you wrote and you think you understand them, and suddenly they open up in ways that you had not glimpsed at all. Like, and you, wow, that's so cool. You know? Yeah, well, that's the essence of the argument, and it's still the essence of the argument, you know? Frankly, I mean, the argument that Duncan had with Barrett Watton in 1978, like this sort of historic, I was just reading about it again somewhere. It won't go away, you know. It really won't. And oh, I know this was some guy who was he was like propagandizing for Watton. Um, the people know about this tape, like this encounter. Yeah, it was all about Zhukovsky and how you read Zhukovsky. Do you read Zhukovsky as using algorithms, which is a new formalism? It's the it's the formalism of the new critics in a completely, you know, redressed and disguised, but it's the same formalism. And that's what Duncan said at the time. He said, you know, I fought formalism for like 30 years and won, and now you guys are back claiming to be new American poets, but introducing this, it's not about algorithms. It's about a life, he said. It's about a life.
Didn't
Like
didn't
poetry,
didn't Duncan
Tchaikovsky. What?
didn't Duncan also say, about the language poets, I'm not sure what they're trying to do, but when I find out, I'm against it. Something like that.
Yeah. Well, when he went to this night with Watton, apparently he was dressed in his mage's outfit with a big cape, you know, and his magic jewelry. And he was ready to do battle with, like, you know, the spirits of the new critics. Um, and then, you know, Watton tried to suppress, he did, in fact, suppress the tape for up until a few years ago, um, and used that ability to silence Duncan to spread this story about what a bully Duncan was and how Duncan had, you know, physically ripped the microphone from his hand and on and on and on. And then people finally got a chance to hear the tape.
How was the
And
tape secured?
how was it secured? Will I get in trouble, I wonder? I went into the poetry collection in Buffalo and I had a little machine that I bought from somebody in China that you could it would turn cassette tapes into digital files. And so I had it under my hat and I would just slip the tapes in there and we got the whole thing. Yeah, that was fun. Those were the days. No, those weren't the days, actually. They were fun. That was that was quite an emotional moment. Anyway, so that is the issue. That's the issue in terms of thanks, Cass. Oh man, they'll never let me back in. I have to get back in. That's where Jack's stuff is. I don't know. I mean, I think anyway, whatever. He must have known. Jim must have known. I mean, this thing suddenly, this tape is suddenly on the internet, like the day after I'm in the poetry collection listening to the tapes.
Was it the day after?
It was like the day after, yeah.
Poetry is news that stays news. You're not kidding.
Well, really, you know, I
What about
mean,
other
people,
what about other passages from the HD book that we could go over since I'm
yeah, does
concerned
anybody
about
have
our time?
anything marked down that knock them out or
And let me know the page and I can pull it up pretty quickly if anyone wants to do that.
I love that whole passage about Sally Rand and the the way in which he read the dream over and read it over and read it over, but it's really long. Um, what are you holding up, Julia? Did you hold something up? Somebody held something up.
I have the Sally Rand passage queued up, so if you want me to pull that up and we could read from it.
What page is that, Paul?
That is page 442.
Okay, wait. Chapter 8. I woke again this morning before dawn, but there is only what I rejected of the dream to work with, and back of that, not even an image, but a name that seems out of order, disorderly. Sally Rand. Once I bring the name up, back of the name, I glimpse the fragments of a dream image I must recover now. I had, I gather, in the scene that most form part of the pictograph, been caressing HD's naked back. One member of the dream work or of the Chinese written character as a medium for poetry I have to do with was my hand moving over the bare shoulders and back of a woman who in the dream was HD. But she was also the forewoman, the last element in sequence. Well, I have no more than the name, the popularity, the vulgarity, the de vulgari eloquentia of Sally Rand to work with. Must I bring this matter up in the transgression of boundaries, even here where I have meant to keep boundaries fluid and self-creative so that no content would be out of bounds? I feel uneasy. One of my readers writes in the margin, I find these pages a little querulous and oddly defensive in an almost petulant manner. I never would have thought that. We can see, Fenollosa writes in his essay, The Chinese Written Character as a Medium for Poetry, which coming into Pound's hands in 1916 opens the way in modern poetry for ideogram and projective verse, not only the forms of sentences, but literally the parts of speech growing up, budding forth one from another, as the scene of the naked back and the name of Sally Rand are for us parts of speech. All that poetic form requires is a regular and flexible sequence, as plastic as thought itself. Perhaps we do not always sufficiently consider that thought is successive, not through some accident, but because the operations of nature are successive. The transference of forces from agent to object constitute natural phenomena, occupy time. Therefore, a reproduction of them in imagination requires the same temporal order. He is so thorough in the way that he encounters phenomena. He never rushes into some. He doesn't push it somewhere where it means something. He just opens and opens and opens the approach to it, letting more meaning come in and more meaning, like holding the naked back. I mean, they're not even related in a sense, right? I mean, although by the end of this, like it's really quite stunning how he's dug it out and revealed this, fundamental stuff at the bottom. But the to hold things in mind without forcing them into some meaning, some understanding, but to hold them in relation to each other so that meaning can begin to generate between them rather than forcing them into a meaning. Trying to understand. It's so hard. Like anyway, the last 2 years, I don't get poetry readings very often, and I love to read my poetry. So the last 2 years, I just organized my own fucking poetry reading. And I have a friend who's got a little jazz club, and he let me have the place for a night. Um, but mostly I spent a lot of time talking about, and the people that I invited were not, I invited poets, but they didn't come. I invited like the people that we knew through our kids' schools, and the people that, the doctors and the steam pipe fitters and the lawyers and that's who came to the reading, just people and who had never actually probably, I don't know when the last time they read a poem was, but it had been a while. And it was really fun to talk them through how to listen to a poem without trying to understand it, like to let go of that ego drive to conquer meaning and let the poem play in their ears and let their in their minds um and it was really rewarding because people had a new experience. A lot of people had an experience of language that they had never had before, and it was a eye opener. And that's the way Duncan. I mean, I think they could say I learned that from Duncan, or from Robin maybe, but that you don't. Although Jesus, I mean, you can't. Yeah, I guess you have to be like a Buddha or something to actually stop wanting to understand things altogether. Um, you can kind of get through the worst parts, but there's always some part of me anyway that's like going, I don't understand. I need to understand. I need to understand what's going on. And Duncan doesn't suffer that. Duncan has this remarkable ability to introduce all of these elements and then let them work relationships with each other and generate sense out of the way they come together, they attract each other, they speak to each other. Uh, but you have to let that happen. You can't make it happen. Uh, I find it interesting that I mean I get the embarrassment. It's like at the end there at the bottom of the 442 where he says, "Must I bring this matter up in the transgression of boundaries, even here where I have meant to keep boundaries fluid and self-creative, so that no content should be out of bounds? I feel uneasy." Well, he's caressing HD's naked back, right? I mean, I dig that. I do not think it was defensive and almost petulant, whatever. The way he goes on, it's actually very much like if you've read Dora, that's the only, I mean, coming up when I did, the only Freud book that you read was Dora, and you read it in an English class. You didn't read it in a psychology class. Um, and Dora, it's very much like that. It's like he arrives at an answer, and then the answer gives way to new information. And then there's a new answer, and then there's new information. And there's just this constant expansion and increasing complexity of understanding without ever arriving at an understanding or a conclusion. But
Oh,
yeah, man,
Michael? Yeah, hey. It seems too that in this section he's very conscious of kind of in a conversation with Ezra Pound.
Yeah.
and almost regarding his uptight aesthetic, fascistic aesthetics and way of moving and communicating even. Um, he's Duncan being very kind of vulnerable and in the dream time and in the unconscious. But it's funny that he brings up the Fenalosa dream there, the dream of the ideogram
Yeah.
on the back. It seems there's something there. Yeah.
What's there, Matthew?
Well, I'm just saying that I think he's as much as he's a student of Pound and he loves Ezra Pound, he's also pointing out his difference from
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And it was, yeah, and it was a difference in the poetry too. I mean, the poetry of Pounds that Duncan turns to are the first poems and the Pisan cantos and
Mhm.
what comes later. I mean, because that's when Pound, like in between, Pound turned his poetry into like a propaganda organ for social credit, basically. And if you can read that, I know people who have read it. I've never been able to work my way all the way through that. It's like
Oh, those cantos in the 50s are very difficult to muddle through.
they're like, yeah,
But
they're
also
tedious.
even his critical writing, though, the early stuff, ABC and Spirit of Romance, is very pounding and declarative and harsh, So, and whereas Duncan's he's kind of
Yeah,
disappearing.
Spirit of Romance. I know it's true. When he stays, like the Spirit of Romance is a different book, I think. But I hear what you're saying. Like well, that's what Gertrude said, right? Ezra Pound is like a town crier.
Mhm,
Great if you're a town. If you're
mhm,
not, not.
mhm. If I can back up to just a minute, like that passage that we read about Sally Rand and the dream and so on. Um, I find, and I found this in person too, that his thought is a kind of sketching where suddenly things look like they're one thing, and then he sketches a little more, and no, it's over on this side now.
Yeah,
And then he sketches a little more. And in person, when he was teaching, he would talk that same way, also interrupting himself all the time with an emergent thought that had him kind of shaking because it was delicious to him. And those of us in the class, I don't know who first said it, but there was this kind of agreement that you listen to Duncan teach the same way you listen to a fugue.
yeah,
You can't you can't grab. If first of all, if you grab, he's gone on another 5 miles and you're left with a kind of a skeleton of thought that doesn't pertain. And so it had something to do because we could see him thinking in a way. It had something to do with slowness, although his speech was going a mile a minute.
right.
But
Yeah,
the actual process was continually inviting uh, clarifications, complications, other possibilities. It was flooding in a way. Um, And I find it in certain passages here, although uh, um, because it's written, it's calmer. But
My experience was the way I described my experience with Duncan, listening to Duncan, was like it's like you're floating in the middle of the ocean, and you're just floating there, and then every once in a while you kind of sink down and with you something grabs your attention and you sink down and you think about that for a while, and then you come back up again and he's still going, right? And you're still out there in the ocean of his mind. But that you can't, he was, there's no way anybody could grasp the what Duncan was saying, the entirety of, I mean, Duncan, because he didn't say this brings up the whole binary thing, Boyd, in a way. I mean, the way that he taught was to overcome the binary um, by constantly moving from one side to the other as a way to not get caught up in the either or. Um, but so I'm curious why you introduced that question of the binary and Noam Chomsky.
Well, and sorry if I can sort of interject here. This is my small moment of following up. So yeah, so why is that important? So um let me slow down here and first of all acknowledge what Julia said, and that was absolutely um uh brilliant, and I I it's also part of what I'm saying. Um, but one of the things I want to point out is that the idea of the binary is itself a misunderstanding of what Descartes was actually saying.
Oh,
That's what Chomsky is trying to point out. So the binary itself was built upon an idea of mechanical philosophy, right? And so mechanical philosophy was the understanding that if something touches something else, there will be an effect. And so let's say a billiard ball touches another ball, there's an effect. If there's something in the world that touches something else, there's an effect. But Chomsky's point is that that was destroyed by Newton. So there is no dualism in terms of what is happening. There is no idea of the body and the mind. We actually have the mind. The body was destroyed. So Newton introduced the idea of action at a distance. And action at a distance meant there weren't two things touching at once. And that sort of destroys the idea of dualism. It doesn't mean that we understand how the world is, precisely the opposite. It means we actually don't have an idea of body. We have a good idea of mind, but our idea
not
of
really.
body
We don't have a
really
good idea of mind
incoherent.
because it excludes body. The idea of mind
Yep.
excludes body.
I, and also I think this ties in with Duncan's obsession or enmeshment in with the polytheism and Ovid metamorphoses is that things are constantly magically shape-shifting. There is
Yes,
no solid.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. Yes.
yeah.
But I was listening to Duncan earlier today giving a talk on Olson, Charles Olson, and he was reading some Olson poetry, and I was amazed at how good he was at mimicking Olson's pace and reading, and he channeling Olson, in other
Yeah.
words, of one of many voices he channeled, I imagine.
So when you talk about binary, you're talking about you're just saying I'm not sure what you're saying. Are you saying that it's the binary has been destroyed? I mean, it's still there, right? Like it's
Right. And so it's hard to explain this in a few moments in a a session in which we've all worked for a long time and like reading Duncan and
Yeah,
so
I hear
so
you.
I don't want to distract what we're actually focusing on. And all I'm trying to say is I think the question of what it means to, because I'm someone who is invested in uh, sort of philosophical literature that wants to be precise, and that's one thing, right? And I also think that like the Enlightenment is good, and that's great. But I think Duncan is really trying to come to terms with the question of what a poet is. And that's a hard question. And so the idea of like what is mystical, if we can just say, oh yeah, these things can't be understood, blah blah, but they could be understood by someone else, is one thing. But I think Duncan is really trying to understand what can't be understood as we know it. That's a really hard question. And I think he's really trying to work through this in this book.
He is. I agree. Um, and the question is how does the poet is someone who um, is open to the world, is open to the opening of the world, and doesn't like poetry is not taking sides in Duncan's view, right? Duncan's view is that it doesn't real poetry is poetry that somehow manages to embrace the energy of what he calls what is. And what is everything. It's like what is, you know? Uh, so how do you embrace that energy and still have a moral and political sense of the world? That's not easy. It really isn't easy. How do you stop yourself from becoming someone who just churns out, ideology in the form of verse? And there's a lot of people like that, There's a lot of bad poetry like that. 588. Should we look at that? You guys are good. You're fast with this like chat thing. Like I can barely read it like before it's gone. Paul's got it.
So the place I was looking at is at the top of the page where Duncan says, um, in the enchantment in which the spirits of hours and moments appear, we are led to an inner feeling of things that changes the world about us into the world of the poem. It resists metaphysical concern. Well, it does not rest at all on such a concern, but only on a thing seen and heard. And then he goes on in later in the page to talk about by the time of the War trilogy, HD is most aware of a many-leveled experience. So she's drawn back to the old mystery cults, to mystery, not to mysticism. And I think
Right.
that's the kind of thing I want to mention here.
Yeah.
The idea that like mystery is not the same as obscuring something.
Yeah.
So mystery just means that we don't have an answer to it, right? And I think poets are really good at that. And that can often be confused with the idea of like you want to obscure what actually happened, or you want to obscure what actually took place, and so forth. And that's precisely the opposite of what HD was doing in the War trilogy.
Right.
One of the things that's really interesting about uh, HD and Duncan's approach to like visionary experiences is that I was re-skimming, I should say, Tribute to Freud over the weekend, and
Right.
HD has these two very famous visionary experiences in there the writing on the wall and the vision on the ship. And I don't know if everybody knows this or these passages or not, um, but she never tries to interpret them like Boyd is saying. She lets it remain a mystery rather than mysticism. She does let Freud interpret it kind of, but she never really interprets it for herself. And I noticed that I don't think Duncan ever talks about these experiences, which I thought was very interesting since he talks about everything else in HD.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in a letter, in one of his early letters to HD, he he notes that she'd been invited to a séance at William Butler Yeats' house, that Yeats's wife was conducting a séance. This was something that they did regularly, and she had chosen not to go. And Duncan pointed out that her choice not to go there, like his choice not to become a theosophist, to join some theosophist organization, was a choice. He calls it for life, a choice for life. Um, and what he's saying is that it's you'll never those those ways of approaching that experience will always result in some kind of reduction and manipulation. Um, and that you have to, she says it in the, I think I mentioned this too, in The Sword Went Out to Sea. She talks about she participated in seances with Lord Dowding, and they actually, the table apparently, or the experience of some people at the table was they communicated with dead flyers, airmen who'd been killed in the Battle of Britain. Um, and HD's response to that, as she describes what happened, was she says, I don't know if that actually happened. Nobody knows if that actually happened, right? But something happened. And we're just trying to find a way to talk about this something that is very difficult because it's not part of the mechanisms of meaning that are available to you in the ordinary world, um, the day-to-day world. At least not here, not in 20th century North America. So it's not mysticism. It isn't. I mean, I don't know why that word has taken on bad
Well,
connotation.
Michael,
Yeah,
to that point, or somewhere around that point, anyhow, um, yeah, on 520, where he's talking about Henry Corbin,
yeah,
um, and uh, he's quoting in the middle of the page, and I think it's important because whatever all of that mystery is, if you read the poems, Robert's poems, um, if he has a guide, it's love in different forms. And there's this interesting quote here. I'll just read it. The union that joins the possible intellect of the human soul with the active intelligence, which it refers to as dator formarum, angel of knowledge, or wisdom Sophia, is visualized and experienced as a love union. Now, to me, when I read HD's poetry, and she is encountering um, the ticking of the clock, for example, and what that emerges into for her that becomes the language of the poem. Behind it is affection, is love, is the willingness to read into phenomena so that so that the pine cone in the ashtray burning takes on an importance of value, which she, in her particular poetry, seems to be led by, be led in her understanding of where she is in her own life and the portent that these happenings have for her. And
Yeah.
you can't do that without a fundamental seat, for lack of a better word, of love, of
Yeah.
attendance, of willingness. And so I think that as a personal characteristic or perhaps a personal need, I have no idea, drives Robert. It drives him to his multifarious curiosities.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really important because wherever else he is mentally, what he may or may not understand, the motor behind this monstrosity called Robert Duncan is this deep affection. And I find it mostly in the poetry, but I find it here too. I mean, how else could you do this
Yeah.
for so long, so quietly,
And over and over.
and
Like,
over, and with no guarantee that it's ever going to see the light of day?
no. And he was
How
like, he was, there were like four manuscripts for per chapter that would turn up, you know, and he would have one here, one there, one, and then, but then he would read them. He'd be reading them because each one would have different notes in it where he had decided to change this or change that word or,
that's the sketching I'm
yeah,
talking about. And
yeah,
it's endless, it's tireless, it's
it's poetry.
well, it's alive. It certainly is alive.
It is a life. That's right. And a life is a poem.
I think on that note, I had bookmarked a passage from 427, um, where he's kind of just like introducing, like he was kind of explaining to us a little bit like what he's doing, here on page 427. But he says, I seek now in working upon the later draft of the book, not to correct the original, but to live again in its form and content, leaving in successive layers record of for reformations and digressions as they come to me. I don't know, I think that really struck me. He also had like this image, I can't remember where it was, but like this like as like of the leaf. That like it's like the veins of a leaf is like the form of a poem, where it's like this organic kind of just sort of growing outward and exploring and just sort of like tracing basically like what gives life in the subject matter that he's approaching. And I don't know, it was just I think it's interesting because he also has this other overriding um habit or belief or like sort of method of this like generating meaning and like constantly coming back and being like, what else can we get? You know, like what is the digression we haven't done? Like, that's what this whole book is. He just keeps coming back and he's like, okay, and like we're still gonna generate something new out of this, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. That he finds so much life and vitality in it.
And don't forget what his overall plan is. It's to go through an ordeal that will result in a poetics, which means he wants to transform his fundamental being. He's in it to transform his being so that he can write poetry.
Well, and he does it in a way because those books that he wrote, I mean, the opening of the field came right on the heels of this, right?
That's right. All the great, I mean, not to put down the poetry before, but
I mean, I love letters, but it's in a different,
yeah, I know, in Heavenly City, Earthly City,
yeah.
it's a different Duncan. It's really interesting actually to look at the poetry before the HT book and the poetry after the HT book. And there's a fundamental change. It's not an easy change to describe, but it's because of this process um, that he went through. His whole relationship to language changes.
I just wanted to pick up on something because Boyd, I know something that you've been bringing up is like this question, like what can the poem be or what might the poem be? And like to me, I like Michael, what you just said of like he's engaging in this ordeal to like transform himself, to like have it for change to occur. That now we're also saying we like witness in the work and like the before and after. And I don't know, I don't have like anything to go on with that, but it just I see a linkage there maybe.
And the question I would put to you, Michael, is how is his poetics a cosmology? Because he's engaging in this to change himself. So the
Yeah.
cosmology, let's just say it's to reach your full potential or to become fully individuated or whatever, however you want to say that. And he's realizing that poetry does that, but it's not the kind of poetry Randall Jarrell would favor. But he's over and over delineating aspects of the creative process, aspects of writing, aspects of language, aspects of composition that get at different angles of his poetics as
Yeah.
cosmology.
Yeah, Gerald, and I mean, I'm not an expert on those guys. Like, I don't find their work very interesting, and I haven't read it, and I'm certainly not a scholar on that stuff. But um, what I have read, it's like it's like all about me. It doesn't really get beyond the ego and the ego experience of the poet, you know? So, and it's about the horror of wars, and it's about being a wino alcoholic, and it's about um it's all about self in that sense.
And
And
Duncan points that out early when he's talking about how imagism was corrupted. And he
yeah,
specifically cites two people, including T.S. Eliot.
yeah. And it's just not interesting. I mean, I'm glad all those people are alive, but tell me something interesting. I don't I don't want to know. I mean, so if you want to write about this horrible experience you had as a child, fine, but tell me why that's interesting. Like, can you push it beyond just some kid had this horrible thing happen, or does that extend into a realm of meaning that the event characterizes, um, but doesn't complete? So you're pushing beyond the psychological or beyond the sociological toward the cosmological, Paul, which I mean, is that how the meaning that you attribute to those events has to do with the cosmology that you live within, you know?
He points this out in the letters.
I missed your joke, Cass. Sorry, what was the joke? Sorry.
Oh.
Cass, there's the workshops that I facilitate are poetics as cosmology and life as rehearsal for the poem. So Cass was saying Paul's next question is going to be, and he was alluding to the second of those. And yes, I need to know these things better. I'm going more and have been going more on intuition, but if cornered, I can speak about it. But this is not the purpose of the class. However, I was very interested in hearing what you said about that. But to the letters of, and this is one of the things that put me onto this track. The letters of Robert Duncan and Denise Levertov has a passage where he's going into the three main streams of North American poetry. I could pull it up if given 40 seconds or so.
While you're looking, Paul, could we look at 511 in the middle of the second paragraph that begins in a conventional art? No, you went too far. Yeah, there it is. Somebody read that.
In a conventional art, the sense of beauty is a sense of what other men will find beautiful, pleasurable, enhancing, and exemplary in their social terms. Poetry would present models of feeling, and reviewers of this order commend or chastise the poet's being to their taste or exciting their distaste. But there is a higher or larger order of poetry where beauty is a sense of universal relations, of being brought into intensities of even painful feeling. Here, the virus is life, the hatred is emotion, the breaks in consciousness that in conventional thought seem inroads of natural chaos or damaged passages that need surgery or correction are serfs or sunspots of the deep elements. That's interesting. Yeah, that's it.
Well, that's a statement certainly about the poetics he's arriving at.
Yeah, yeah. I was listening, as I say listening, I was in the car a fair bit this morning, and I was listening to Hillman's code, the Soul's Code, where he writes about he calls it the acorn theory of he's talking about how we relate to children and their how we relate to our own like ourselves as children, not to mention the children that we have or whatever. And he talks about the fact that we tend to, in the current regime, we tend to look at, quote, symptoms as something to be cured rather than revelations of calling,
Revelations of what?
of being called to your destiny, being called to your your place in the world, like your whatever it is you're going to do.
Or what HD would call your appointment.
Yeah, exactly. Um, that's it. And this reminded me of that. I mean, it's how do you look at beauty? How do you look at beauty? The virus is life. The hatred is emotion. The breaks in consciousness that in the convention, oh man. And like passion has something to do with this too.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
passion is kind of on the ropes these days in terms of poetry
But
work.
it's part of love, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the, it's, well, yeah, it means it's like the passion of Christ. It has to do with suffering.
Which is what he's going to go on to in, I think, the next chapter. I don't
Yeah.
know, soon.
Soon. Yes. That passion. And it's like, it's associated with, he talks about this. I think I mentioned it last week. He's got that passage on the passionate intellect. Uh, as a counter to the critique of passion as a distorting emotion that pulls you away from clarity. He talks about the passionate intellect as opposed to the cold intellect, that you encounter way, way, way too often in certain places of learning.
So I
It's
found,
a it's a way of bringing in alchemy. It's a way of bringing fire to the work, you know. Uh,
I found the segment in the letters where he's talking about those three different kinds of poets. Would that be of interest to pull that up?
yeah, I'd
Yeah.
like to hear that.
Okay. So it's here. The conventional poet, universe and life are chaotic. The natural is formless. Chaotic, the poet, the civilized moral man is given an order to keep against chaos, or as Duncan would say, chaos. Every freedom is a breakdown of form. Freedom equals A, disorder, or B, sin.
Yeah,
Then the free verse poet, and we're reminded of William Carlos Williams' notion that no verse is actually free, that each takes its own patterns and tendencies. And he says that Ginsberg's Howl is an example of free verse, where the universe and man are free only in nature, which has been lost in civilized forms. The poet must express his feelings without the trammel of forms. The poem does not find or make, but expresses. Free verse just doesn't believe in the struggle of rendering, in which not only the soul, but the world must enter into the conception of the poem. And then the organic poet, which he is in dialogue with Levertov at this time about, and says the universe and man are members of a form. Freedom lies in the apprehension of this underlying form, towards which invention and free thought in sciences alike work. All experience is formal. We feel things insofar as we awake to the form. The form of the poem is the feeling, and where form fails, feeling
Feeling.
fails.
Yep.
yeah,
Same thing. I mean, what Julia pointed out was, I mean, so the same line is what he was tracking and was part of the poetics he was developing in perhaps more than in any other example in his dialogue with Denise Levertov, and their friendship, which was conducted oddly enough via letters, which seems so crazy now, where someone doesn't text us back in 2 minutes. It's like they're pissed at me. I know because it's been 2 minutes since I texted them, whereas it takes 2, 3 weeks for a letter to get from
it's
where.
so sad, man. I found a box of letters that I had from friends. I had correspondences like in the 70s,
Yeah.
and it stops after the 70s. Like there's no more. And the record of the things that we said back and forth in those letters were so, I mean, like it was touching in one sense, but I mean, there was also like a constant commentary on the world that was tied into that. And it's all gone now. Like there's no more record. There's no more correspondence. Like I guess people save their email, but you know what? Email just doesn't cut it. It does not cut it, you
It's
know?
it's better than having a box of faxes from the 70s.
That's what Robin used to do, right? That was Robin's technological advance was to he could get it to you right away. He wanted to get you the letter right away, so he would fax you the letter. Um, But then email came, and that was a whole other technological layer that it's it strips it strips the correspondence of any kind of somatic connection. And that's the problem with the world that we're moving into more and more and more, is that it's not it's anti-Semitic. It's like there's no touch. There's no A letter still smells of the person who wrote it, you know? You can smell the perfume or the sweat or whatever. And there's the handwriting. Um, and
Yeah,
now they want to like abolish the post office. Like it's really the post office?
This is why we have our postcard fest, Michael.
Yeah.
So people can send postcards to each other, and it's taken longer and longer for them to get to where they need to go. But I've got some really awesome ones from this past year.
Yeah, I mean, mail art wouldn't be possible today, really.
We're
there,
trying.
So expensive to
It'd
mail.
be very expensive, yeah.
there are two succinct statements on 559 that we've already discussed these, but here he is saying it in his words. Okay. The first one is the last sentence of paragraph 1. The volition of the artist is to fulfill the form or will that he feels or discovers in the thing
Yeah.
he is making.
Making. Yeah. Oh,
And
I
then
love that.
it's so succinct. I mean, it's very succinct for Robert.
Yeah.
I'm proud of him. He got
Yeah.
it in one sentence. And then in the middle of the next paragraph, it is in the poem that the parts of the poet are gathered together. It's just so beautiful.
I also turn our attention to something on the previous page that connects with something that you were talking about, Michael, with the passion um,
Yeah.
on 558. It's he says the meaning of the crucifixion scene is not the unhappiness of a lynching party, nor the mere suffering of a passion, but it belongs to a poem in the actual world, the fulfillment of a prophecy or story form. And I'm curious how that how that hits you.
Where
It's
is that?
558. It's at the top, so it's just on the facing page of the one we just read off of.
Got it.
Yeah.
We'll go down and read the next paragraph. In our work, we lose ourselves, our independence, the Jesus of each one, or it is fused and enters into the radiance of another power of the same being, another person we imagine in the community of language and our work there that we call the poet. It is in passion, in suffering, that even as we cry out, we become workers, organs, instruments of our art that is fateful or formal. The Christ is the music, the sense of needed form, the overlove a new master. In the Gospel of John, it is called the round dance. If thou wouldst understand that which is me, the Christ says, know this, all that I have said I have uttered playfully, and I was by no means ashamed of it. I danced, but as for thee, consider the whole. He really gets into it. I love the way one of the things that is markedly different at this point in the book is that it's become fragmentary. Like his ability to or his desire to hold everything into an understanding, like especially in part 1, I mean, he exhausts those topics that he takes on about eros and the social and so on. By this point, now it's just bursts of thinking, which is, if you think about it, like much more our experience, our actual mode of relation to thought, um, than the artificial, long, unified, complex argument. It takes a long time to make to put one of those together, in my experience. But these are like bursts of meaning, just like bang, bang, bang. And they have, but they don't, but they're not held to some rule. It's much more a question of thought in action, like literally in action.
So how do you begin to edit something like this?
Oh, that was easy, man. Like it, I just, we didn't do anything except incorporate the changes that Duncan made, to go through all the manuscripts of each chapter and incorporate all the changes that Duncan made. That's all we did. We had no other sort of editorial intervention. Um, I think there was one spot in chapter 5 in part 2 where he couldn't arrive at a language. He was trying to write about the civil rights movement, and he didn't know whether to say black or Negro, or I mean, it was like a time when all that the language was like up in the air and he was struggling with it. Um, but the impulse was inclusion. He wanted to move toward more and more inclusion.
It
No, these bursts of thought, these Nietzschean bursts that he has. Did he have the little dot in there the way you guys put in with the printed copy? Did he?
No, I don't think so. Not in the notebooks. I don't remember what he did in the notebooks. I honestly
Okay.
don't remember.
Yeah. They were all handwritten,
But
or
they were
they were typed.
well, they were typed. I mean, at one point they were handwritten probably, but I never saw. No, I don't think they were handwritten ever. I think it was always
Yeah.
on typewriter. And there
Okay.
were a couple of different typewriters. One in San Francisco, and we theorized the other one was in Stinson Beach, because
Hmm.
they had a beach house there and often
Yeah.
went there. Um,
He was supposed to be a master typist, wasn't he? Like super fast. He did it
yeah, he was.
professionally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah. He was really good.
He at one point earned money typing for people.
He was actually the secretary for Jaime Dangulo,
Oh, I didn't know.
and Jack Spicer studied linguistics with Jaime Dangulo.
Huh.
So, and and Duncan, I think, typed up Jaime Dangulo's talks in sort of a projective composition by field manner, as I recall. You're talking about Duncan and how he wanted to be inclusive. Um, so there in the Lisa Jarno biography, there's some very juicy quotes that talk about identity, that talk about composition. There's three that I quoted when I wrote some notes, just a little blog post on some notes on the ambassador from Venus. So I'm going to share those really quick because I think they would be helpful. The first one is, what if poetry were not some realm of personal accomplishment, open field day race for critics to judge, or animal breeding show, but a record of what we are, like the record of what the earth is left in the rocks, left in the language? Then what do we know of poetry compared to this geology? And how silly we must look criticizing, as if geologists were to criticize rather than read their remains. And, and then what I call the divine is what I begin to divine in the poem. The dream, the dance, the falling in love, and the poem seem to me to be of one kind, a seizure given to us, overcoming the pose of the ego, commanding us to attend the need, enthralling us in the spell of a form we must achieve. To be a poet is to be prepared for that seizure, to have learned in the hand all the command one has of language, to have a tongue that is ready and true to the heart, so that speech may come when the mind is not yours. And the last one, I would have questions about any of this is, I think, in the 70s. I would have, and I think this was from a talk at UC San Diego. I would have questions about any of the new minority movements simply because it seems to me that the whole issue of our time is that we barely hold on to writing as human beings, which is the hardest thing of all to do. To write as a woman, or to write as a man, or to write as a black, or to write as a gay poet is absolutely minor compared with how do we hold this new human consciousness.
Yeah.
Well,
Is that a cat's tail, Aaron? How do we hold this new human consciousness? It's all on you.
You don't do it by giving up 12 runs to the Blue Jays. That I think is
No,
very clear.
no.
Hey, Michael, I'm curious as you dive in and engage with this material again after some time away from it, is anything standing out fresh and different for you?
Um, I think I'm more aware or more sensitized to the way Duncan is carefully avoiding non-creative boundaries. The way that he's constantly opening his own investigation beyond where he thought it was. Um, it's like such an intense commitment, and it's fundamental to everything he believes, and he's doing it. Like he's walking the walk, as we used to say in the when was that? It was 90s, 80s, sometime back there in ancient history. Walking the walk. That's what he does. He's not, there's no, and it's a struggle. Hey, we are so conditioned to think in terms of forms that we've been taught. I was going to say imposed on us, but we've been taught, you know, to break out of that. And centrally to that is this whole way of looking at the world in terms of binaries, either or, you know, either A or not A. That's Aristotelian philosophy. And
The law of non-contradiction.
that's it, the law of non-contradiction. And Emerson, Whitman's response to that that was Emerson's response too. It's like, do I contradict myself? Very well. I contain multitudes, Whitman said, you know. And Emerson said, do I, he said, consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, you know. Like, do I contradict myself? Well, I will say what I mean today, and what I mean tomorrow. And it doesn't matter if it's different. It's inconsistent. Consistency is not really a goal. No, that's not the goal. And Duncan manages, I mean, that's what he's working because that's where his poetry comes from. The later poetry totally comes from there. It's the Deleuzian answer to either or is and, right?
both and.
Yeah,
Or and so, as Pound would say, and so.
yeah. And that's what Duncan does here. I guess that's what stands out to me, Scott, more powerfully this time through. And just the man's intellectual passion. It's such a example to me of how to think, how to think. I don't have any time anymore for these, analytical blah 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 blah. Like so what? Like if you're gonna tell me something that matters, like and if it matters, like then you should let me know it matters and why it matters.
There's another interesting kind of summary statement at the bottom of 582. Last paragraph. Yeah,
To find the hour.
somebody else. Yeah,
To find the hour and the place, bringing into the fictive creation the particulars of the actual life, is part of the magic of self-transformation, so that the creative fiction enters the sense of actual reality. HD, like Dante, like John of Patmos, has no experience that is not meaning. I love that. No experience that is not meaning, that is not, by emblem or rubric, part of feeling beyond her feeling. The events of her life are not only personal, they are also hints of a great universe to which all man's fictions belong. Dante's astrological and numerological practices, reading the nine of his fictions into the times of his actual life, take creative thought in actuality as they take action in a creative fiction, akin to HD's practice of astrology and angelology. I had been thinking of Gabriel, of the moon cycle, of the moon shell, of the moon crescent, of the moon at full. It is taking thought where the poet begins to have a heightened sense of time and this life as informed by this work. But our work, which may have been the alchemical work or the work of the art, is now, in a larger sense, a life work or evolution of life in which we play our human phase. See, I love that. I mean, it's not locating it in us. We are being located in it. And that is the really crucial move that faces us now is moving beyond this instrumental self that thinks it's in control of everything
or understands
or
everything.
understands, yes. I mean, and into a relation to the with the world where there is the authority of something beyond us.
Well,
Americans are
read the
Americans are
last,
sorry,
read the last.
I want to introduce my little Canadian critique of Americans here, right? Sorry. Americans are particularly bad at this because they decided to kill the king and throw the tea in the harbor. I mean, we have little fictive stories here, right? I mean, they took it all over. They denied his authority, they denied the everything and made everything reliant on the individual.
We're ready to kill the next king, just to let you know.
See, we didn't kill the king up here. We just negotiated with him for 100 years. and then got the same thing, but nobody died. It took a little bit
Well,
longer.
we don't have
Mm.
100 years, Michael.
Sorry?
We
Now,
don't. We
not
don't
now.
have 100 years.
Yeah, not now.
So read that last sentence.
The poet begins to have a heightened sense of his involvement to a great work beyond his work. Yes, we have to, anyway, I mean, I don't want to get preachy, but somehow there has to be a change where we acknowledge that we're not, we're not the center. We're just as much a peripheral event as a rock on a beach. And then your sense of responsibility changes in relation to that world.
There's a great essay by David Abram called The Air Aware. It was published in Orion magazine. I give it to workshop folks any chance I get. And he, in it, says a couple interesting things. The first one being, if we allow that mind is a biospheric quality, an attribute endemic to the wide sphere that surrounds and sustains us, we swiftly notice this consequence. Each region, each topography, each uniquely patterned ecosystem has its own particular awareness, its unique style of intelligence.
Yeah.
That's one thing that he says.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think I mentioned before the opening poems in Maximus 456, where instead of the hero slaying the bull, Olson has the bull slay the hero as a kind of image of the world asserting its authority over us.
at 5 in the afternoon, at exactly
Yeah,
5 in the afternoon.
at 5 in the afternoon.
The other quote,
Midnight.
the other quote I wanted to share from that essay, and then I'll let it go, is it may be far more parsimonious today to suggest that mind is not at all a human possession, but is rather a property of the earthly biosphere, property in which we, along with the other animals and the plants, all participate. The apparent interiority that we ascribe to the mind would then have less to do with the notion that there's a separate mind located inside me and another distinct mind that resides inside you, and more to do with the sense that you and I are both situated inside it, a recognition that we are bodily immersed in an awareness that is not ours, but is rather the Earth's.
Yeah.
And I think Duncan and people like him are the literary equivalent of this way of engaging reality.
Yeah, then
Oh,
through Whitehead,
absolutely.
Whitehead was a big example for that systems thinking, right? And
Yeah.
yeah,
And he got it, I think, in large part from the Huayan Buddhists.
ah, I believe
Who,
that.
who, who, Whitehead?
Yes, I believe so.
Really? Huh.
Interdependence or paticca samuppada. Yeah.
And Whitehead has become, who was so central to Olson, has become a significant player in the minds of European philosophers like Isabel Stengers and Bruno Latour, and they're taking that towards a way of rethinking our relationship to the world, rethinking our claim to authority. It's really interesting. Do you know Stenger's great book? It's called Thinking with Whitehead. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful book.
We're down to 8 minutes in the last class. Before we get the grand summary from our fearless leader, I'm wondering if 3 weeks from tonight would, don't mean to set you up,
Three,
but
three
hey,
weeks
that
from today.
3 weeks from today, I think it is, what is it, November 5th? I believe if that works for people, Wednesday, November 5:30 Pacific time. If there's a consensus on that, then it'll give us a chance to read some more. I'm going to be conducting 2 interviews between then, but I'll try my best to finish. And I won't do it at the cafe amongst the Zoom callers. But that's my hope. Does that work for folks? 3 week notice like that? Yeah. And then
I can do it, I
okay,
think.
that's fantastic.
November 5th.
5:30 Pacific time.
That's Guy Fawkes Day. And if I can't make it, which I won't probably, but I will I'll just watch you guys on tape. It'll be great.
Okay. So we'll go with that. Hearing no other objections.
No, we'll do that.
And I love the fact that we were asking questions about the book and sort of getting the inside story. I mean, because that's part of the beauty of having one of the co-editors in the room and facilitating this, so we can kind of get some sense. Did I ask why didn't it get published in Duncan's lifetime? Did I ask that question? Because if I didn't, I want to ask that question.
Well, I can tell you after Duncan died why it didn't get published. Before Duncan died, I'm not sure. I think I talked about this. He had a deal with Black Sparrow to publish it. And he actually, there's this paper you can get for typesetting um, that's got lines on it that keep the text disciplined within a proper typesetting environment. And he did a number of chapters. He typeset them for what's his name, John
Martin.
Martin. And but then something happened. There was some fight between Martin and Duncan, and Martin canceled the book. Uh, and that was that. And then Duncan died, and the curator of the poetry collection at Buffalo became his literary executor, and he had no interest in publishing anything. I don't know. I mean, he sort of did, but he was like incompetent, honestly, and he couldn't put together a manuscript that would pass the University of California's readers. Um, and it just went on and on. And then there was that big conference in Buffalo at one point, a Duncan conference, and people were like, yelling at him, why haven't you published it? And it didn't budge him.
And then the literary executorship went into the hands of Peter Quartermain. Yes.
No, no, it didn't.
Yep.
I thought it went to, well, what's the guy's name? I don't think Peter's, maybe I missed that. I could have very well have missed that.
Yeah, I think so. And
But there's a foundation, and it's Mary, a very Catholic name. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm old, and
I don't know about that, but I was there when the literary executor made his pitch and got the job.
yeah,
Disastrous decision, but it was after Robert's illness had gotten worse, and the dialysis needed to be done more often, and traveling. We used to take turns taking him to the dialysis center. What's her name? Norma Cole, myself. There were a whole bunch of us. We took turns. And then that couldn't happen anymore. And, this was all costing money. And they wanted to put in one of those elevators on the staircase from downstairs to upstairs. And the nameless person was in the bedroom with Robert. By sheer accident, I happened to be sitting in there with him, and he made a deal with them for the elevator, and I don't know what else.
Yeah.
And that's how
For
it came.
everything. He got money to cover everything. All the health expenses.
Well, that's how it
For the
happened.
archive, in exchange for the archive. Yeah.
Right.
Hey, just a sec, Paul, it's Christopher Wagstaff. Christopher Wagstaff
Right.
and Mary Margaret Sloan. They're on the Jess Collins Trust, I think.
Yep.
But they were crucial in wresting the control back uh, away from he who shall not be named.
You shall not. Right.
We
Um,
don't, I don't know. No, I don't. Yeah. Well,
Takes us
this
to
has
it.
been a real pleasure, guys. I mean, talking with you has just been really, really delightful and stimulating for me. And Lord knows I need stimulation. You know, I'm fading fast.
Stop. Just cut it out.
It's
We're gonna
true. So,
we're gonna try and bring Michael to our festival next year. That's our hope. So October 9, 10, and 11, that would be an opportunity for us to engage Michael and people sympathetic to this. And Matt Treese is on the board of directors, and he helped make the fest happen. And Lauren was one of the featured readers, and Cass was so very helpful in help in cleaning up as a volunteer and other duties. And Lowell Murphy helped write some grants for that. So I'm grateful for a lot of people in this room. And this festival is a really beautiful thing. And to have Michael there, we don't have a lot of these occasions anymore. They used to be a lot more plentiful in our culture. And when you cut it down into, sort of the new American poetry, that limits it even more. So to have this experience, Michael, is really beautiful, and I'm really grateful to you. And the quality of the dialogue was very impressive. So however you all got here, I'm really grateful, and I hope you'll
yeah.
subscribe to our blog posts and get this information and participate in other things. So thank you so much.
I'm going to miss you. So
well,
anybody who wants to be in touch, you can just email me.
it's been a lifesaver for me. I mean, literally, it fell out of the sky like a jewel. And I am so grateful. I
It's
am
so nice to see you, Julia. It's so nice.
well, yeah, it's been a long time.
It has.
It's so wonderful to listen to you.